History brush and art history brush tools. Hi guys, today we will talk about the history brush and art history brush tools. Let's get started, and we'll start with the history brush. It is closely related to the history palette. History brush can be called archival brush in some versions of Photoshop. It is located right here. Let's choose it. This brush allows us to return to any other stage of our work at any time. You probably remember that the number of steps of the history is limited by the number that we have set. We considered this at the very beginning of our course, and it is not always convenient. Even if you have a huge number of steps there, it is problematic to search for the stage to which you need to return. Moreover, sometimes we need to return not all images to their original state, but only some parts of it, and in this case, a history brush can help us. To begin with, to make it clear, I will show the principle of this tool on a simple example. We have an image, let's colorize it. Image, adjustments, and choose hue saturation. And here we have colorize option. We click it, and the image gets this color. You can edit it somehow. Let's say we took some more steps. Well, for example, we applied some kind of filter. For example, we will have a blur filter. We choose Gaussian blur and blur our image completely. And imagine that now you have decided to return some individual parts of your image to its original state. And we take the history brush, which by the way has the same settings as all the other brushes: size, hardness, transparency, pressure, and so on. And now I have a soft brush with 50% non-transparency. I swipe over the image, and you can see that some parts along which I'm drawing are returning to the original state, and as a result we can get an image like this. That's it. The act is based on the fact that by default we always have such a history brush icon in our history palette above the very first frame that we created. In fact, the reference point is the image that is opened. But there may be several points where we fix our image so that we can return to it again. Let's try to do it. So I'm going back to the original state in the history palette. I click here, an image is becoming the same as it was at the very beginning. And let's do a few more operations. I select image, adjustments, vibrance, and here we can edit bright shades to our image. We can do it right now and click OK. We have this action in the history palette, and now we are taking a snapshot of this state by clicking on this icon. And you see, now we have this picture, which we can even somehow name. And no matter how many steps we take after that, we can always go back to the moment when we added vibrance. And now let's do the opposite of this action. Well, for example, image, adjustments, desaturate. I do the same thing, take another picture, and so there can be any number of steps after that. That is, you could do anything with your image. You can have 1000 steps here, but these frames are saved, and you can always return some parts of your image or all of your images if you need this particular initial state. Let me do something else. Well, for example, I will blur it again. Let's choose motion blur for a change. Well, just like that. I am improvising right now, to be honest. I just want to show you that there can be a sufficient number of steps here below among our actions. And now I can choose which stage of my work I want to return. For example, if I want to go back to desaturate, I click here and a history brush is taken. And for example, I want to remove the blur effect from some parts of the image. There is a blur somewhere, and somewhere it is erased. Now, for example, I want to work again with the vibrance parameter. I put the historical brush icon next to the vibrance parameter, and let's try it. So it restores area only by 13%, but it restores exactly to the state that I had at the time when I applied vibrance. If I increase the brush value to 100%, then of course everything will be restored by 100%. But if I overdid it, I go back to the desaturate option. Let's say I set the opacity of 50%, and I can desaturate some places again a little. That is, you have some freedom here. And of course, if I suddenly decided to restore everything, then in this case I choose the very first frame. And so, for example, I am now returning face to its original state by 50% or even by 100%. That's how it was. In the process of work, if you feel that some stages of your work are important, you can immediately take a snapshot of the stage in the history palette in order to be able to return to it at any time in the future, or even just continue working from this place. And it may also happen that you want to save some of the stages of your work as a new document, and for example try to make another version of your work. In this case, you select the desired frame, right-click and select a new document, and you have a new window in Photoshop, which is called the same as your picture is named in the history palette. And here you can try, for example, to make the different version of your work and choose the option that you eventually like more. Well, now let's look at an art history brush. It is located in the same place as a history brush, and it partly works like the mixer brush tool, but it returns, or rather mixes the colors of exactly the picture that you have chosen. That is, you can also set several snapshots and work with them. See how it happens. All brush settings are similar to all other brush settings, but there is a choice of style. It defines everything. For example, if you have a tight short mode, then you get something like this. So these are the strokes. If you have a loose curl long, then the strokes become completely different, and you can create such abstract composition. And in general, there is a place to apply your imagination. The types of smears depends on type of chosen brush, and only at first glance, this tool seems rather chaotic. Let's still see how it can be applied. I'm going back to the original state in the history palette. I create another new layer, fill it with white. I reduce transparency so that I can see the background. Then I create another clean layer, so we'll have 3 layers. And on this clean layer, with the help of an art history brush, we change its settings, transparency and styles. I will now create images. That is, I just draw on this layer, and here is how it might look like. In the process of working, you can change the size of the brush and its transparency. You can change the blending mode, and you can create different parts of your image on different layers so that it matches your idea. And you can of course use other tools and combine them with the brush. Just now I wanted to show you how you can create a work that imitates watercolor using only one tool. But if you apply, for example, another brush, if you create the same pictures that we talked about at the beginning of our lesson and apply various effects to them, and then return to them, then your work can become even more interesting. Working on a separate layer allows us to also apply the eraser tool. If we have done something wrong, we can always erase what we have drawn or redraw. The whole work took me less than 10 minutes. At the end, I made a composite layer using a shortcut, Shift plus Alt plus Ctrl plus N plus E. I combined all the parts of the image and applied a soft light blending mode to it. Thus, the work acquired the shades I need. Unfortunately, the program doesn't allow me to display such a long keyboard shortcut on the screen. Just remember, Shift plus Alt plus Ctrl plus N plus E. Now let's talk about homework. Well, let's start. You can apply to this image the effects that you like. You can even experiment. Look for some other effects. Try and combine the use of these effects with the history brush tool. The second task will be the creation of such an imitation of watercolor painting. But you can take firstly some other source code, and by other settings and other styles, you can create something different. It can be oil or gouache painting. Everything depends on you. And I hope that I will see quite unusual, creative, maybe even very talented works within the framework of this assignment. And it's all for today. It was Peter Romanov and AIM School. See you next time.